Now we're going to invite Mark Farid, who is an artist from London, and he did a very interesting experience. I met him by the social network a few months ago. He had lots of press with his project. He will explain to you how he wants to live 28 days with an Oculus.
In this playground of immortality, the preservation of experience has taken hold of our existence. We're able to stay connected even when hiding from one another. The illusion of companionship without the demands of relationships. We choose to text rather than talk. Where we are but simulations, we cannot be ourselves. These simulations blur the lines between fiction and reality, and when they permeate back into our lives, they obscure the sense of ourselves and of one another. Where both spectator and spectacle inhabit this blurred reality, eroding individuality and the sanctity of consciousness. Because we've grown up with technology, we assume technology has grown up too. We're being isolated as it continues to progress. And as we've never been taught how to be alone, we only know how to be lonely. The distinction between physical reality and its simulation is blurring. And if our consciousness is experienced through the perception of sight and sound, through interaction, through technology, and through our conception of knowledge, to what extent is it really our own?
Okay, so yeah, for 24 hours a day, for 28 days, I'm going to wear an Oculus Rift like you guys had outside, through which I'll only see and hear what someone else is seeing and hearing for those 28 days. So they'll be wearing a pair of glasses that have 3 lenses built into them with binaural audio microphones. And they will have first-person point of view. So this was a 24-hour test run we did a while back. Here we go. This is only using 1 lens though, so I couldn't look around from left to right like you can do with yours, but we will doing the real thing. So I'll shower whenever they shower, and I'll go to the toilet when they go to the toilet. And I will eat the same things as them and drink the same drinks as them at the same time. Otherwise, I'm completely isolated in a room on my own. I'm free to move around as I like, so here I just started running because, I'd been in it for 24 hours, slept with it, woke up, started the next day, and I was just quite bored. So, he was running, so I thought I might as well run. But really it's to test how I start to move and how do I behave within those restrictions. So, after 3 days of not speaking, 5 days of not speaking, a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks of not talking to anyone, I will start talking, but it's then what am I saying? Does it start to sync up with what the other person's saying? Because, I'm in that position. Do I believe, at what point will I start to believe that reality is my own reality? So you'll see in a minute that he was playing Grand Theft Auto in one of the shots here. And I don't play Grand Theft Auto, but he started shooting, and I just started going poof, 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 poof. That's the only time in any test that we've done so far, 52 hours is the longest, where I did start to mimic his behaviour, and that was me unknowing, and it was only watching it back did we find out that actually it did start to actually kind of happen. So this other person that I'm living as, I don't know anything about them. All I know is that they're a heterosexual male over the age of 21 living with their partner. That's because, so that the living with your partner bit is so you narrate your own life. If you're living alone, if you go to the shop, you just walk down the stairs, walk down the street, maybe get a bus, but I don't know what you're doing. If you live with your partner, you'd say, I'm going to the shop to buy some milk, do you want anything? No, I don't, cool, I'll be back in 20 minutes. Suddenly I know, rather than having to guess. And also sex. This is a test over mind over body. And sex is a psychological and an emotional thing, as well as a physical thing. And to test whether I can actually believe that as I'm really having sex. You know, over the 28 days for the 24 hour each day, this is open to the public at all times. And I'll be in a room that's separate, but you can all see me. And I don't want to be masturbating. But, you know, my parents could be there. But that's a first insight into publicly whether I have lost my awareness of my surroundings. So although it won't look like this, because that was just the test that we were doing, there'll be like a glass wall dividing us with a bed shower area. At the front of the bit, there'll be 3 talks going on each day, an editing suite at the bottom, and 6 self-contained flats at the top for everyone. You'll see a little floor plan of it in a minute. But yeah, so I could go on talking about this for ages, but because of limited time, I'm actually just going to jump to the concept, actually. So, just to give you an idea, this is the floor plan, just to give you a better idea. So everything's there, so you can see the food being prepared and kind of what it looks like and what's happening. So yeah, that wall in front of the bathroom kind of area will be a bit of glass that kind of frosts up using smart glass, so I can have some dignity, if that's possible. But yeah, so just skipping on a bit. Yeah, so this is the general premise of it is that, you know, I don't believe there to be an inherent self. I think who we are as a cultural identity. And so this is kind of a little thing that I made kind of trying to explain how I think society works. So at the top is kind of, you know, where the power actually works. So not necessarily just bankers, but more the establishment and the actual how it works. You know, the people who are protecting their own interests as the primary thing, and sometimes there's a knock-on effect onto real people. And so, you know, the media are kind of in there, and then government's just below. But then you get to society and where we are and what we think is socially acceptable, and what think laws and, you know, education, what we think morally is right, and what we choose to spend our money on. You know, once we are slaves to money, but then once you move past that, once you're past the necessity of accommodation, food, water, heating, you know, we believe that we need more. And, you know, the London riots, I think, are something that replicate that quite well, where, you know, that was a protest, that whether they knew it or not, that was a protest with less wealthy people from council estates going to these places, but they chose to loot, and they chose to get this new shiny TV that they're told will make them happy, and these trainers that, you know, that they don't need. But why is that inbuilt thing into us that we all want these things? And that comes from higher up, and then it comes to us. That's where I think actually individuality starts and becoming us, kind of this middle ground bit. And I think it's all taste. Taste of clothes and music, but then taste in what you find interesting. Whether that be, so my interests are art and football. But if football wasn't around to me, you know, I wouldn't have that interest in football, and I'd probably like something else instead. So I actually start to see that groups of people, actually, the individuality in the Western world, in the UK anyway, I think it's the only place I can comment on, actually doesn't really exist. It's what is decided for you to be there, and then it comes to you. I'll talk about that side in a minute. But then, so there was a scientist in 1952 called Claude Shannon who did this experiment with artificial intelligent mouse. And this mouse, it should be coming up any second, this mouse, you put it on a maze, and it will navigate its way around this maze to the pre-designated target. It will learn that route, and then it can just keep on going back there over and over again. I will just skip it just to show you. Sorry, the clip off YouTube, this is the best I could get. Yes, that mouse will go round over and over again. But it's a common misconception about that mouse that, you know, that mouse, it's not the programmer of the artificial intelligent mouse who is the autonomous one. It's the person who made that maze and the person who put that mouse on the maze. You know, that mouse can only act accordingly to what is there, ready for it to do. So then you think about us in the 21st century, and actually how different are we to that? You know, we have the decisions to make, we have the decisions within the maze to do what we want, but we didn't create the maze that is life. Sorry, I'm just doing this quite quickly because time is running out. You know, that's us in the 21st century. But yeah, so then that's the physical world. And, you know, there's also a part to the physical world where everything that we interact with comes down to senses. You know, it comes down to sight, sound, smell, touch, and taste. But what if we remove... So without senses, you know, we're numb to the world and we don't really know what's going on. But in a world that's predominantly built for sight and sound, you know, this world, if I can't smell, you know, but no one knows that until I tell you that. But if you lose a sense, your sight or sound, then it is a completely different world. And, you know, like I was saying earlier to someone, you know, we live in square pods in bedrooms and houses. We have square gardens. We walk past trees, you know, around Paris that are planted in very specific places. We go to the park to enjoy nature, but that nature doesn't exist without man. That is man-made nature, and we're constantly reacting to this environment that we're in and behave accordingly, or so I would argue. And, you know, even the way the wind travels down the road and hits you, that is responding to the environment that we've artificially created. So we get to this point, actually, where, you know, we do think that we're free and autonomous, but actually we're constantly reacting to the surroundings that we're in. But the internet then should and could have been the democracy to free us from all of this, and technology should enable this. So I've used democracy there, ironically, in its meaning of opposite to a dictatorship. But I think the internet is actually the merging of the two. Because, you know, it's the capitalist dream in the sense that anyone can go there at any given time, pay a small amount of money, and create a site for someone to do anything on, where you can have your opinions, and when it gets more and more popular, you can start selling off that data mined information and start selling advertising rights, or, you know, you can do whatever you want. And as it gets bigger, you then have this, you know, you get a monopoly. And then you look at someone like Facebook, where that succeeded so brilliantly for them, and it was great. But where Facebook is even cleverer, and why it's truly great, is that psychologically it's turned everyone into a celebrity. You know, it's magnified the desires of others to be jealous of our lives, and that's what we all actually want, because, you know, we're all quite insecure and want validation in some way. But where it becomes different is where you start documenting your real life to put it on the internet for everyone to see. Because then your real life experiences are existing in a virtual space, but it's all experienced through the physical self. So we get to this point where actually this documentation is starting to mimic real life. And, you know, is it possible for technology to mediate experiences? And I think it is. You know, I think more and more, especially with virtuality, is moving that way. But actually where it's got even cleverer is that other people are sharing information about you. And we're happy, you know, we see that little red notification, we get a slight endorphin rush, and then we're great, you know, someone's publicly acknowledged us, that other person's happy because they've shared that information about you with them, and Facebook's happy because it's yet more data mining. But, so what does all this actually mean? And all it actually means is that we're losing the right to privacy and anonymity, you know, and you can say that really blasé, and we're all aware of this going on with the NSA, and, you know, we're all aware of this, but we carry on using it. You know, I still have Facebook, you know, I think it's a terrible thing, but I still use it. And it's the lack of anonymity, which is actually a thing that interests me. So this other person in this project, you know, I don't really talk about him, but for 28 days, he's okay with having his life broadcast publicly, for me to see, but also other people to see online as well as in the actual space. And it kind of shows you where we've really got to in society in terms of that idea of privacy. We've had over 100 people apply to be the other person. And the reason for sharing this life online, I think, is this validation that we're constantly striving for. But how does he validate his life when he's doing it? Is it about if someone says that's a great life, or is it about him being chosen? Or is it if I truly start to believe that I am this other person? Is that the validation that we all desire, that not only is someone looking at it, not only immersing themselves, but truly believing it? And then we get into this conflict of interest, where what happens if momentarily, even just momentarily, I believe that I am this other person? Whose identity does that belong to? Because is it possible to have a shared identity? You know, one's mind is reality, but reality is the mind of the owners. And to paraphrase my favorite quote, when you die, you don't die. When you die, the world dies. And it's true, because the world is continuously shaped in our image, in our emotions, in our upbringing. So to ask, can we have a shared emotion, seems slightly silly. But actually, memories are so altered and changed and malleable and actually fictional, because we change them all the time as we please. So then we get into this idea that, we're endlessly striving for our lives to be documented, shared, and ultimately validated by someone else. But validation can only come through the restraints of recognition. So what if we relinquish all control of recognition? What if we break down the barriers of the virtual world and the physical, where they're actually meeting to the same point? You know, does one override the other? Or does it actually, you just break down into this other thing because you're continuously being watched? So if I'm watching this other person, I freely entered into this to let him control my life for 28 days. But he has also freely entered into this thing where he will be I will be watching, you know, there'll be this tangent where he knows all of his actions are being documented and watched. So he's not truly free in his actions anymore. So who is actually in power out of the two of us? It gets the cyclical circular motion where actually neither of us are truly free. So I bring you to the final line of that trailer that we were watching. You know, if our consciousness experiences the perception of sight and sound, through interaction, through technology, and through our conception of knowledge, to what extent is it really our own?